And a welcome to another tropical update from Cayman Hurricane Center. Again, folks, we were closely monitoring our system developing in the Western Caribbean. That did later become potential tropical cyclone 9. And folks, now we do have the system designated as Tropical Storm Helene, and our storm system has already caused some havoc in the Western Caribbean. Very heavy rainfall producer, and we have seen where impacts were felt across the Cayman Islands. Of course, tropical storm warnings were in effect here, and of course, we do see additional watches and warnings out for the Yucatan, for Cuba, and for the United States. So we'll be running through this here in a moment here. But folks, here is our system here. Again, high resolution satellite imagery here. You can see our system here ramping up over the Western Caribbean. Now, our system came up out of the southwestern Caribbean, sort of looped over through this area here, and started to move not quite like that. Get a little bit better control of my pen here, but again, more of that direction. Again, slipping by the Cayman Islands, and then on a more northwesterly track here through the Western Caribbean. There has been a little bit of a wobble or sort of a cyclonic movement of the center of recent. We'll be closely keeping an eye on that here, and I'll have a quick look at that here in just a moment. But just quickly running through the updates here, folks, with this system. And this is what we have at this point in time. As of the advisory here, around about 19.5, 84.3, about 180 miles east-southeast of Cozumel, 170 miles south-southeast of the western tip of Cuba, roughly about 191 miles or so west of the Cayman Islands, particularly Grand Cayman. Winds are at 45. The movement, again, generally will eventually get off to the northwest at about 12. Pressure at 1,000 millibars. Again, we do have, again, noted the watches and warnings in effect. Hurricane watch in effect for Cabo Cat Oche to Tulum, Mexico, the Cuban province of Pinar del Rio, Englewood to Indian Pass, Tampa Bay. And we do have a tropical storm warning for dry Tortugas, the lower Florida Keys west of 7 Mile Bridge, for the Cayman Islands, particularly Grand Cayman, Rio Lagarto to Tulum, Mexico, the Cuban provinces of Artisma, Pinar del Rio, and the Isle of Youth. We also have tropical storm watch in effect for the middle of Florida Keys from 7 Mile Bridge to the Channel 5 Bridge, Flamingo to south of Englewood, and west of Indian Pass to Walton Bay County line. We also have a storm surge watch in effect, Indian Pass southwards to Flamingo, Tampa Bay, and Charlotte's Harbor. Again, folks, we are expecting that this system will traverse through the Yucatan Channel and then a northeasterly turn or north-northeasterly turn over the Gulf of Mexico, eventually making its landfall as we get into the latter portions of this week. Probably somewhere in the Florida Big Bend area. Could potentially be a bit further to the south and east. So Tampa Bay area and areas just north of that should be keeping a close eye on this. Could be potentially talking about that core getting into the area. Now, I want to also note this here, folks, that this system will be expanding in size as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. It's already quite a large system in and of itself. in terms of its convective canopy. But certainly, as it gets to the Gulf and as it builds, it will be growing in size here. So, a very vast area of Florida are likely to get in on the action of the system. With that being said, additional watches and warnings will likely be required for the U.S. later today. Again, also noting that we are expecting somewhat of a very quick rate of intensification here, folks. We are expecting that this will become a hurricane and then onwards to a major hurricane. There is even the possibility of a potentially significant major hurricane in the Eastern Gulf. So we're going to be needing to watch this very closely here, folks. Again, as of this point in time, the tropical storm force winds extend out roughly about 140 miles east of the center. Again, we do note that with that being said, we have had tropical storm force winds for the Cayman Islands, though it has been easing as the system's been pushing a little bit more to the west. We could see some more gust potential there, especially on these eastern bands that are very heavy. Again, this system does appear to be doing a little bit of a loop here. Again, it was a bit on its northwesterly direction, but it did kind of take a dive southwest here. Likely what will be taking place here is within the broader area of low pressure, the center, the tighter core likely sort of doing a sort of cyclonic movement here, will eventually head off northwest and into the Gulf. So we'll note that. But of course, with that being said, the eastern half of this spreading a lot of that activity across the Cayman Islands, across the northwestern Caribbean. And again, we're already seeing that for portions of Cuba. Now, quickly running through in terms of impacts here. Again, significant rainfall maker, especially for the Cayman Islands. We'll be seeing some of that extend into Cuba. Again, we're looking at 48 inches for western Cuba. For the Cayman Islands, could even see some isolated totals there getting into about a foot or about 12 inches, maybe just a tad more than that. We'll be watching that closely. And over the Yucatan Peninsula, 4 to 6 inches with isolated totals of 8. And of course, that will be bringing some considerable flooding. The southeastern U.S., we are looking at, again, a pretty good rainfall maker there as well. 4 to 8 inches with isolated totals of about a foot, 12 inches. That could result in considerable flash and urban flooding, minor to moderate river flooding, and the possibility there of isolated major river flooding. So we're going to be watching that. Now, quickly going on to the other type of flooding as a result of storm surge, we're looking at, for the Florida coast, Ockaloonie River to Chesapeake, 10 to 15, Chesapeake to Anclote River, to 6 to 10, Indian Pass to Ockaloonie, 5 to 10, Anclote River to middle of Longboat Key, 5 to 8, Tampa Bay, 5 to 8, middle of Longboat Key to Englewood, 4 to 7, Englewood to Bonita Beach, 3 to 5, Charlotte's Harbor, 3 to 5. We could be seeing, again, those storm surge totals, 2 to 4 for portions of Cuba, as well as for the Yucatan Peninsula as we go forwards. And we could be seeing that storm surge situation. We are seeing a little bit of that for portions of the Cayman Islands as well. Not as much, but again, we're looking at that, especially with the south coast and that onshore flow. With that, hurricane conditions possible in the watch areas of Cuba and Mexico as we get into Wednesday. Hurricane conditions possible in the U.S. watch areas Wednesday night into early Thursday. Tropical storm conditions, again, in the Cayman Islands. That'll likely be easing up a bit as we go, but still some pretty windy conditions there. Cuba and Mexico later today with, again, tropical storm conditions beginning in the Florida Keys into Florida as we get into Wednesday and beyond. Swells impacting a vast area of the Northwest Caribbean. That'll eventually spread into the eastern Gulf. Again,